The galaxy had grown comfortable with the idea that humanity was expendable, a minor player in the sprawling council of interstellar powers, one whose influence could be ignored without consequence. And for decades humans seemed to confirm every assumption the other species held about them, retreating from conflicts that could have drawn blood, withdrawing from the political arena with a patience and discipline that frustrated even the most calculating alien strategists who could not comprehend why humans did not escalate, why they did not strike, why they seemed content to let others carve up the galaxy in endless wars, and in that complacency the other civilizations made mistake after mistake, assuming humanity's withdrawal was weakness, believing that their star systems and technological advancements had left humans vulnerable and irrelevant, a species to be watched but never feared. And yet beneath the quiet surface, humans were anything but idle, quietly expanding. Their colonies in sectors overlooked by the Galactic Council, developing technologies in isolation, perfecting strategies and simulations that accounted for every possible alien tactic, exploring and learning from the ruins of civilizations that had underestimated the wrong species, building alliances with minor species ignored or abused by the larger powers, understanding that patience was not surrender but preparation, and that every moment spent ignored by the galaxy was a moment humanity could use to gain knowledge, strength, and perspective. And when finally the trigger came, when some minor skirmish in the barter system was blown into a supposed human defeat by reckless alien commanders who wanted to send a warning to the Council, humanity responded not with caution, not with negotiation, but with methodical and devastating countermeasure that no one had anticipated, deploying fleets that seemed to appear out of nowhere, weapons capable of reshaping battlefields with precision strikes, and intelligence operations that anticipated enemy movements before they were even conceived. And in that moment the Council realized they had been reading history upside down, that the humans they thought had walked away had been walking a path of their own design, mastering the tools and tactics of every major species around them, learning to exploit weaknesses that no one else thought existed. And now they had returned to the galactic stage not as a distracted, retreating humans of memory, but as architects of war strategy so comprehensive, so impossibly calculated, that entire fleets were neutralized before they could mount a defense. Star systems previously considered secure fell into silence as humans demonstrated control over space travel, energy manipulation, and battlefield coordination that rendered conventional strategies obsolete, and the aliens, who had laughed and whispered among themselves about humanity's irrelevance, now scrambled desperately to understand the magnitude of their miscalculation. But comprehension came too slowly, for the humans did not merely fight. They orchestrated outcomes, reshaped political hierarchies, protected species who had suffered under alien negligence, dismantled propaganda networks, and exposed the arrogance of those who had assumed superiority over a species they barely knew. And as a first wave of human intervention swept through contested sectors, entire council convened in panic. Realizing that the humans who had left the galactic war untouched had not gone soft, they had been observing, waiting, building, learning, and now they were back, not for revenge, but for enforcement of a principle that had been ignored too long, that humanity, underestimated at every turn, would not allow the galaxy to be ruled by those who mistook caution for weakness, and in the silence after the initial strikes. Before the next engagement began, the message was clear and devastating in its simplicity, that walking away had not been retreat, it had been preparation, and the humans had returned with something worse than the galaxy could ever have imagined. The initial shock of humanity's return reverberated through every star system, shaking councils and militaries alike as alien commanders struggled to reconcile their memories of passive humans with a disciplined, relentless force now pressing into disputed territories, and every misstep they had made decades earlier became glaringly apparent, as fleets that once thought themselves untouchable found themselves outmaneuvered in ways that defied logic, with humans employing strategies that combined centuries of historical analysis, alien warfare theory, and instinctual creativity that no species could anticipate, and on the ground, human forces executed precision operations that liberated colonies previously considered lost, restoring stability not through overwhelming numbers, but through a combination of timing, technology, and psychological warfare, exploiting the arrogance and overconfidence of alien administrators who had ignored every warning, every minor incident, every signal that humanity might be more capable than anyone believed. And in these liberated sectors, civilians watched with awe as humans coordinated relief, repair, and defense simultaneously, demonstrating a level of adaptability and resilience that inspired loyalty and fear in equal measure, while alien observers reported in panic to their superiors, insisting that the humans must have secret weapons, advanced mind control, or even forbidden technologies. And yet the truth was simpler, frighteningly so. Humanity's strength lay not in alien tech or some mysterious edge, but in their ability to anticipate, improvise, and unite across cultural, political, and technological divides, leveraging diversity as a weapon while others relied on rigid hierarchies and predictable doctrine. And as weeks turned into months, humans began systematically dismantling alien supply chains, communication networks, and command structures with surgical precision, striking not out of vengeance but efficiency, each operation designed to maximize impact while minimizing unnecessary destruction. And even as alien propagandists attempted to paint humanity as ruthless invaders, the liberated populations, once oppressed and silenced, began speaking out, recounting the fairness, discipline, and clarity of human forces, stories that spread across the galaxy like wildfire, further undermining the authority of the very powers that had thought humans were a minor concern, and through it all, humans maintained an almost eerie calm, never overextending, never underestimating complexity of the galaxy, always aware that while they wielded unprecedented power, they were not invincible, and this awareness translated into strategy, patience, and foresight, allowing them to outthink adversaries at every turn, leaving alien leaders scrambling to predict actions, only to realize that for every move they made, humans had already accounted for it and had contingency plans for contingencies, and the message became undeniable. The species that had once walked away from galactic conflict had done so not from fear or inability, but from a deliberate, patient cultivation of strength, intelligence, and resolve. And now, having returned with a scope and understanding that eclipsed expectations, humans were reshaping the balance of power in the galaxy, proving that underestimation was the deadliest mistake an alien civilization could make. As the humans pressed deeper into contested space, the alien species that had once treated them with condescension began to understand the full scope of what they had ignored. Entire fleets now immobilized not by sheer firepower, but by the calculated precision of human tactics that exploited every flaw, miscommunication, and overconfidence inherent in alien command structures. And while some species tried to form coalitions to halt the human advance, they discovered that humans had already anticipated alliances, inserting themselves into political negotiations, exposing treacheries, mediating disputes, and turning former enemies into allies through a combination of clarity, fairness, and strategic vision that left alien diplomats both impressed and humiliated. And even as humans liberated systems, they did not annihilate those who had opposed them unnecessarily, instead demonstrating restraint that only magnified the impact of their power, a terrifying combination of efficiency, an ethical consideration that alien societies had never witnessed before. And on worlds that had once been used as pawn territories, humans introduced technologies and governance systems designed to empower local populations, ensuring stability while simultaneously creating networks of support that extended humanity's reach without overextending their forces. And the more aliens attempted to resist, the more apparent it became that the humans were not a species driven solely by conquest or revenge, but by a comprehensive understanding of interstellar dynamics, history, and morality, exploiting both logic and emotion in ways that destabilized alien strategies while winning hearts and minds. And as the first full-scale human-led battles unfolded, fleets that had considered themselves masters of war found their movements anticipated and countered with precision, entire strike plans invalidated before execution, supply lines cut silently, reinforcements rerouted into traps, and every misjudgment magnified by the human's ability to adapt, learn, and innovate in real time, while human command centers operated like vast, interconnected organisms, processing data, predicting outcomes, and responding with near-prescient accuracy, and the alien leadership began to fracture under the pressure, questioning their assumptions about strength, honor, and intelligence, wondering how they had failed to perceive the humans' true nature, how a species they had dismissed as primitive and cautious could orchestrate a campaign that combined diplomacy, warfare, technology, and morality with such elegance and lethal efficiency. And in the midst of this, Human crews and commanders demonstrated another layer of superiority, their coordination and trust in one another, their willingness to sacrifice personal comfort for collective success, and their capacity for improvisation under pressure allowed them to achieve feats that aliens considered impossible, from reclaiming devastated world without civilian casualties to executing multi-system strikes that seemed to defy the limitations of physics and logistics. And everywhere the humans went, they left evidence of planning, restraint, and purpose, creating an aura of inevitability around their actions, a silent warning that the species which had once walked away from galactic war was no longer bound by patience or observation alone. And the galaxy began to realize, with mounting dread, that humanity's return was not an isolated campaign but the beginning of a profound recalibration, a force that would redefine power, strategy, and respect in every corner of known space, and that the consequences of ignoring, underestimating, or provoking humans could no longer be mitigated by arrogance or advanced technology, for this was a species that had learned, waited, and returned with something worse than anyone could have imagined. The alien species that had once sneered at humanity now found themselves scrambling for explanations, desperate to understand how a species they considered peripheral had so thoroughly rewritten the rules of engagement. And in every council chamber and war room across the galaxy, debates raged over whether humanity's return was an act of calculated vengeance, an unstoppable march of inevitability, or something far more sophisticated, a strategic awakening born from centuries of observation and preparation. And human forces, aware of the panic they had sown, moved with a combination of deliberate speed and methodical planning, liberating worlds not merely to gain territory but to demonstrate the futility of arrogance. And in each encounter, from the smallest skirmishes on outlying colonies to the largest fleet battles near contested sectors, humans executed operations that leveraged every available advantage, from electronic warfare and stealth maneuvers to psychological tactics that turned enemy troops against their commanders. And on the ground, human soldiers displayed ingenuity and coordination that alien generals had only theorized about in simulations, adapting to terrain, culture, and technology with a fluidity that rendered conventional defenses useless, while scientists and engineers coordinated from orbital stations to provide logistical support, adaptive weapons, and real-time intelligence, creating a feedback loop of efficiency that accelerated human dominance without overextension. And as they advanced, humans did more than fight. They taught, they healed, they stabilized, converting former battlefields into hubs of governance and industry, showing the galaxy that human power was not just destructive but constructive, a duality that confounded opponents who expected brutality or retreat. And even as alien fleets attempted desperate counterattacks, they found themselves outmatched at every turn, their strategies anticipated, their resources redirected, and their command structures undermined not by force alone but by the subtle orchestration of human intellect and patience. And the psychological impact was devastating, for the aliens began to see that every step they had taken against humanity, every insult, slight, and dismissal, had been recorded, learned from, and incorporated into a plan of response so thorough that resistance felt almost theatrical, a performance they could not possibly win. And as humans moved from sector to sector, building alliances with oppressed civilizations, restoring communication networks, and demonstrating the value of cooperation alongside overwhelming force, it became clear that their return was redefining galactic norms, reshaping alliances, and erasing old hierarchies, forcing even the most powerful species to reevaluate not just their military capabilities but their moral assumptions. And in the midst of this strategic renaissance, human leaders, from admirals to diplomats, operated with a clarity of purpose that combined empathy with decisiveness, intelligence with action, leaving no room for misinterpretation. And the galaxy slowly began to understand, with mounting horror and grudging respect, that the humans who had once walked away from a war had done so not out of weakness, but because they had chosen the moment to retain, a moment when their power, patience, and precision would leave an indelible mark on every system, every fleet, and every civilization that had dared to underestimate them, proving unequivocally that humanity's absence had been preparation, and their return, the unleashing of something far worse than anyone had anticipated. By the time humans reached the core sectors of the galaxy, where the oldest and most powerful civilizations held sway, the scale of their return became undeniable, entire star systems altered by their presence. Fleets that once inspired fear now found themselves outclassed in every measurable way, and alien leaders who had dismissed humanity as primitive now face a species whose mastery of strategy, technology, and diplomacy had grown beyond comprehension, and in every theater of conflict, humans demonstrated a terrifying combination of foresight and adaptability, anticipating enemy movements, exploiting weaknesses, and converting potential threats into allies or neutralized parties with precision that left even the most seasoned commanders questioning every assumption they had held for decades, and the psychological impact of this campaign was compounded by human restraint. For while destruction followed when necessary, humans often chose to incapacitate rather than annihilate, liberate rather than dominate. And in doing so, they revealed a level of moral and tactical sophistication that alien civilizations had never encountered, forcing generals and politicians to recognize that humanity's superiority was as much in judgment and ethics as it was in firepower, and as humans liberated sectors previously considered lost, they built intricate networks of support and communication, ensuring that populations could sustain themselves and resist further oppression. While alien propagandists scrambled to reinterpret the narrative, failing to contain the truth of human competence and fairness, and as months passed, reports flooded councils of human-led victories that seemed almost impossible, operations that blended science, intelligence, and tactical ingenuity into coordinated efforts spanning entire quadrants, striking simultaneously on multiple fronts, severing enemy lines, disabling starships mid-flight, and undermining command hierarchies without. Unnecessary collateral damage, and the cumulative effect of these campaigns was not only military dominance but a seismic shift in perception, for every system liberated, every alliance forged, and every battle won underscored the lesson the galaxy had failed to learn decades earlier, that humanity was not to be underestimated, and that patience and preparation could amplify what others dismiss as modest or inconsequential into a force capable of reshaping interstellar politics and power structures. And as the humans approached the central command hubs of the oldest galactic empires, their presence alone forced councils to convene in emergency sessions, scrambling to devise contingency plans, desperately seeking diplomatic openings or secret technologies to counter the inexorable tide. Yet every effort fell short against the humans' unparalleled coordination, adaptability, and insight, for they had mastered the art of war and governance simultaneously, creating scenarios where alien leaders found themselves trapped between necessity and impossibility, and in the midst of all this, human operatives continued to document, analyze, and anticipate alien responses, ensuring that a campaign was not merely reactive but proactive, sculpted to achieve maximal impact with minimal waste, demonstrating that the species that had once walked away from a galactic war had not done so to retreat but to prepare, and now, returning with patience honed into precision, humanity revealed a force the galaxy could neither ignore nor resist, a presence that combined moral authority, technological supremacy, and tactical genius in a way that no other civilization had ever witnessed, proving decisively that those who dismissed humanity had made a catastrophic mistake, and that the consequences of that error would be felt across every star, planet, and fleet in the galaxy. As human forces pressed into the inner sanctums of galactic power, the scale and sophistication of their operations became almost mythic in scope. Entire fleets immobilized or redirected before they could engage, command structures dismantled with surgical precision, and alien leaders realizing too late that every misjudgment, every act of arrogance, every slight had been catalogued and turned into advantage. And humans did not simply rely on brute force. They combined intelligence, diplomacy, and psychological mastery to neutralize threats, turning would-be opponents into collaborators, exposing betrayals within allied factions, and demonstrating a level of strategic brilliance that made centuries of alien military doctrine seem primitive, while civilian populations across the galaxy watched in awe as humans restored stability, rebuilt infrastructures, and empowered societies that had long suffered under alien neglect or oppression, and its duality, relentless tactical dominance, paired with ethical governance, amplified the fear and respect they inspired, leaving alien commanders both frustrated and humbled as they scrambled to comprehend how a species they had dismissed could so completely dominate both war and peace simultaneously. And every encounter reinforced a pattern, every victory teaching both humans and aliens that underestimation was humanity's deadliest trap. And as humans approached the capitals of the oldest empires, they revealed technologies and strategies that seemed almost prophetic, utilizing adaptive energy systems, instantaneous communication networks, and predictive analytics that accounted for countless variables, anticipating reactions not in hours but in decades, and even as alien scientists and tacticians worked furiously to counter human innovation, they were continually outpaced. For humanity's strength lay not only in tools or tactics, but in the synergy of intellect, experience, and the unyielding drive to protect and uplift both themselves and those they deemed worth defending. And as the decisive confrontations began, humans orchestrated entire campaigns with an elegance that rendered conventional defenses useless, striking simultaneously at political, economic, and military targets with minimal collateral damage. And as alien fleets faltered and governments wavered, the galaxy came to a terrifying realization. The humans who had once walked away from a war had not been passive. They had been learning, preparing, and evolving. And now, their return was a symphony of precision, restraint, and overwhelming capability, exposing the weaknesses and hubris of every civilization that had assumed superiority. And by the time humans secured the inner cores, their presence had rewritten alliances, power hierarchies, and perceptions across the galaxy, leaving no doubt that humanity was not merely a force to be reckoned with, but a species whose patience, intelligence, and moral clarity allowed them to wield power in ways no other civilization could imagine, proving that walking away had never been weakness, and coming back had never been more dangerous, as the galaxy finally faced the full weight of humanity unleashed. In the aftermath of humanity's systematic reclamation and restructuring of galactic order, the surviving alien empires faced a sobering reality, for every assumption they had held about strength, intelligence, and superiority had been overturned. And as humans moved through the core worlds, they did not seek vengeance for past insults or destruction, but rather implemented a decisive and equitable restructuring that ensured stability while simultaneously asserting their authority, demonstrating a combination of moral judgment, strategic brilliance, and technological mastery that left the galaxy in awe and fear. And even as some factions attempted desperate rebellions, they were contained swiftly not through excessive force but through careful planning, psychological insight, and the use of human ingenuity to outthink and outmaneuver every countermeasure, while entire populations that had once suffered under alien oppression were liberated, empowered, and integrated into a network of human-led governance that prioritized resilience, innovation, and collaboration, showing that humanity's return was not chaos but an order crafted from patience and foresight. And as alien leaders convened in emergency sessions to reassess their strategies, it became painfully clear that the humans had anticipated every political maneuver, every military option, and every potential alliance, leaving them with only choices that serve humanity's overarching vision of fairness tempered by strength. And in these final engagements, humans demonstrated that their power was not merely in weaponry or fleets, but in the integration of culture, science, and strategy, harmonized in a way that created an unstoppable momentum across the galaxy. And as the last strongholds surrendered or were peacefully assimilated, alien civilizations finally understood the cost of dismissing humanity, realizing that the species they had assumed weak had mastered patience, adaptation, and foresight to a degree unmatched anywhere in known space. And as human leaders stood over the councils and fleets that had once threatened them, they did so not with cruelty, but with an undeniable authority forged from experience, intellect, and moral clarity. And the message resounded across the galaxy. Humanity had walked away once not because they were afraid, but because they were preparing, and now, having returned with unmatched capability, wisdom, and precision, they had reshaped the galaxy to reflect a new order where underestimation would be the gravest mistake any species could make, leaving the universe with a single, inescapable truth. Humanity was not just a force to be reckoned with, they were the standard by which all others would be measured. And in the quiet moments after the last conflict, as stars lit up with the promise of a recalibrated galaxy, it became clear that walking away had been only the beginning, for humanity's return had brought something far worse, far stronger, and far more enduring than anyone could have imagined, ensuring that the legacy of underestimated humans would echo through the cosmos for generations, a testament to the resilience, intelligence, and indomitable spirit that defined them, and a warning to any who might think to challenge them in the future.